right now, they're in the hands of the worst group of sociopaths that have ever lived, and they dwarf, by far, Stalin.
How do I even ask this? When we're talking other dimensions, what does that mean?
Well, the universe, let's call it the cosmos, it's described by astrophysicists as sort of this 3D thing. Now, if you look at quantum entanglement and the concepts of the universe being a holographic conscious entity, which it is, then you start talking about not just material, but you're also talking about other dimensions that are at refined levels of frequencies and vibration. So the speed of light, the speed of electrons, atoms, what have you, all of that would pertain to what we call the 3D, three-dimensional. If you were to cross over that in frequencies, and this is, again, where you start getting into some very strange WSFM, like I mentioned, phenomenon, then you're talking about other embedded dimensions, but it's not like it's some distant place, it's folded within. So, a hologram, if you look at a hologram of Marilyn Monroe with her dress blowing up, like that, if you were to just zoom in on one little piece of that dress on the edge of her skirt, and zoom in on it, the entire image would be in there, and zoom in again, it's holographic. So you have to kind of get your mind around the cosmos is this conscious quantum hologram. And so there are many, many, many dimensions, not just this plane of 3-dimension, that is all enfolded within it. So a lot of the confusion happens where everything like something weird, like a poltergeist event, will be conflated with something extraterrestrial. Well, it isn't. It was someone who, like in the ER, I had this happen once, some guy that was killed, couldn't save him, it was murder, and he was angry, and at 3 a.m, he started taking all the stuff out of the cabinets. But he wasn't there. It was just his spirit. Weird stuff. So that kind of phenomenon isn't extraterrestrial, it's interdimensional. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay, so I'm trying to do some very kind of crude analogies, but the confusion comes in is that if you're an interstellar capable civilization, which means you're going from point A in the cosmos to here, B, it's like if this were a piece of paper, you're not going a straight line across the paper, you're folding the paper, being space-time.
Okay.
And so these 2 points are here.
I'm enlightened now.
And so, but in the process of doing that, this sort of bending and altering space-time, you then bump up against and cross these other dimensions. And this is sort of the intersection between what some people call metaphysics and physics, or the conscious worlds and the worlds of light, if you will, the mystics would call astral, and extraterrestrial technologies. And it's a very interesting intersection. I find that the most interesting part of this whole subject, but it quickly, you have to be, you go in the crazy town way too quickly with a lot of people out there who don't know enough to talk about it intelligently, in my opinion. But it's also dangerous, and here's why it's dangerous. Those capabilities can be technologically stimulated to occur. It's like the Skinwalker Ranch. After a certain cell of this covert group got hold of that thing, they started setting up phenomena there. It was absolutely man-made, high-end electronics, but interdimensional. It's like the show Stranger Things. I've never seen it, but that's based on some weird stuff that went on at Montauk on eastern Long Island, the Montauk projects. And we know what those are. I know guys who've been in laboratories where they have a toroid or one of these devices, and suddenly they're pulling in spooky-looking creatures that look like they came out of the ninth ring of hell, and they literally become 3D and are running around the lab. Weird stuff. All right, so the high end of the WSFM is this sort of thing. But that can be used in a deceptive indication and warning. It can be used in a way that everyone on planet Earth would think that it's alien, and it isn't.
I see what you mean.
Okay, so this is the real danger in all of this not being disclosed and known, particularly by policymakers and the government and Pentagon and all these folks, is that they're going to be so easily gaslit and deceived by people presenting all kinds of phenomena, plural, as extraterrestrial when it isn't, because they have mastered the ability of this, what's called stagecraft. That's literally what it's called in some circles. And this gets back to this whole question of Project Bluebeam, where they could stage. But what their capabilities are way beyond what most people think they are. And I began working with some of these geniuses back in the early 90s that I met who in late 1950s and 60s had figured this out. So the electronics and the very high-end electromagnetic field systems that can do this were unpacked pretty well by between 1955 and 1965, in that a decade.
So with the different dimensions, there's another dimension in this room right now, and we just can't.
Within this room, folded. It's the enfoldment. It's quantum entanglement. So, what Einstein called the spooky effect, where the same particle be in two places at once. Mm-hmm. But visualize that at every point in space and time, at this level of quantum entanglement, you have access to any other point in space and time, but also these other dimensions, up to and including the most rarefied, what some people would call the conscious being, the unbounded consciousness. It's all folded within this in what I call the real cosmology, understanding the cosmology, which is way beyond astrophysics, current astrophysics. But I think that's the part of this where when you start experimenting with and reverse engineering an extraterrestrial vehicle, their communication systems are not based on the speed of light like our cell phones, right, or video. They're based on this understanding of the cosmos because they've lived for millennia in that understanding. And so this is why, we talk about the fact that they have technologies that interface with directed thought. I call it technology-assisted consciousness, and consciousness that assists the technology, so they can interface bioelectric field and thought, and they navigate the spacecraft. And I think the part of it that we're hearing from people inside the administration is that they're being advised not to release the information related to the man-made UFOs, which is, of course, the predominant ones seen, but they're also the ones that have been used in criminal and illegal activities, including staging alien abductions and mutilations and other things. So we're going to drill down on that very heavily, but we're also going to reveal a lot of the new studies for the Boogosphere, this item that landed in Buga, Colombia, South America. And yesterday, they just completed the micro CT scan, which we're awaiting the results on that. That will give us an enormous amount of detail on the interior, which we haven't been able to get with normal CT scans that are done on human bodies. This is a specialized aerospace CT scan that actually looks at the internal structures of anything technological. And so that, I think, is going to be very revealing and very interesting. We hope to get those results in the next couple of days so we can analyze it with our scientists, but also with our radiologists. So that will all be presented at the National Press Club along with these new whistleblowers. And we are also going to make it quite clear that the criminal activities that have been documented and now turned over to law enforcement, they need more follow-up on that. And given the fact that there are now some 11 scientists and other people missing that the mainstream news, the media is covering, that they need to push through not only the whistleblower protections that we recommended about 4 years ago that got shot down in the House. It came out of the Senate and the Senate Intelligence Committee unanimously, but then failed in the House vote due to a couple of bad actors who we blew the whistle on who they were. And I think that they need to extend that to, if necessary, federal marshal protection. In other words, personal protective detail. for some of the very high value whistleblowers, HVWs. They're high value targets, but these are high value whistleblowers, and we know who they are, and they have been handed over to law enforcement and also to certain members of the administration, as well as the Congress. But so far, they've all gone out there, quote unquote, naked, without any specific protection for this. And given the fact that this is the largest RICO or criminal network in the world, and they have a proven track record of killing people that are too much trouble for them, I think it's very important that this be brought up at the National Press Club as well. So there'll be a number of issues that'll be very packed and move very quickly because we only have about an hour and a half to do it. It's not a normal UFO conference. It's a press club event. So, but I hope you guys will all come who can make it here to Washington. It's going to be historic.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. I was at the very first press conference 25 years ago, so it's all coming full circle. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and it's all coming. I mean, if you look at the result of what's happened, of course, I get asked all the time by media, when do you think, disclosure will happen? I said, well, I thought it was going to happen in the summer of 1994, after we had briefed the Clinton administration, and they were drilling down very heavily on it. And here we are 32 years later, and we're making a lot of progress. But the big risk is that it comes out either falsely, with a false alien threat narrative, or, as the Vice President, J.D. Vance, said a few weeks ago on the Benny Johnson show, that these are demons, which I got immediately back on Benny Johnson's show, which he's a good friend of the Vice President's. And I said, this is absolutely not the case. And we need to avoid that sort of language, because the last thing you want to do is pivot this thing towards superstitious claptrap or holy war, or that they're, an alien threat from outer space, like Werner von Braun warned us about in 1974, being staged. And now, luckily, recently there was a general who had been national security advisor to the president in his first term, Mike Flynn. And General Flynn and I have met extensively, and he recently posted a warning about this false flag scenario, and I was very gratified to see him do that. We're trying to get more and more people educated about that, so in case they do pull a stunt with a false disclosure or a frightening disclosure or what have you, that we will have other voices besides my own warning about it, because 100% of the UFO subculture has bought it hook, line, and sinker about abductions and mutilations. And as you all know, recently, a former Congressman, Matt Gaetz, was talking about the hybridization program, where military programs have taken extraterrestrial genetic material and combined it with human material. Right. Now, the provenance of the guy who told him that, it turns out, is in question, but the information is correct. And we've known about this since the 1990s. And there's another point where people are saying, I know that other members of Congress recently have said that some of these atrocities that have been going on in deep cover black projects are very worrisome. And they can't talk about some of it because it's been provided in a SCIF, whereas I can, because even if I've gone in a SCIF, I don't sign a non-disclosure agreement, whereas the members of Congress do, which is a strange situation for myself. But it's sort of sui generis, I think they'd say in the legal term. But that's what we're want to be sure that as all this is rolling out, that we keep this information flowing and get more and more whistleblowers who have dealt with directly the man-made devices and their criminal activities, that have been involved, including child trafficking, human trafficking, drug running, targeted assassinations, kill lists, sort of things like wet works, and all of that, which is now being talked about more and more openly in the media with these missing scientists. And so, that's, in fact, I just did an interview for some network yesterday about this. And I think it's important that everyone asks people to tune in on this.
National Press Club event, and also more importantly, the webinar on May 9th is going to have way more information, because we're going to have 4 hours to unpack things instead of only, an hour and 10 minutes with 20 minutes of Q&A. So
Right.
I hope you'll get people to sign up for that, because people get a lot more detailed information there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's to commemorate our 25th anniversary, it's only $25 for the webinar, so it's
Right.
pretty good.
Right.
It was so, what I know, it's coming out so much now about these missing scientists, but this is sort of a concentrated time that they've gone missing, but this has been happening for a long time. I mean, there was Amy Eskridge and Eugene Maloff and so many others, that have been
Sure.
killed.
Right. Now, people I've known over the years that have been killed or disappeared or died, quite obviously, by being scrubbed or burned, like they do a burn notice. Now, one of the things I mentioned yesterday, it was, I think, Fox Digital, their global digital news, and I was being interviewed yesterday. And I said, you have to understand, this has been going on for decades. And I've directly known of people who have been killed. And I said, if you look at The Lost Century, the documentary we did about the energy technologies being suppressed, we documented there are a number of people who were just flat out killed, who were civilians. They weren't even working in a covert program and wanting to come forward as whistleblowers. They were simply, inventors and scientists, or people who stumbled across, how to do the electromagnetic fields in a way that resulted in a free energy system, and they were killed. So I think this is something that we have brought up many times to federal law enforcement and members of Congress, that something like this you really can't sit on. It's kind of good now that sunlight is the best disinfectant. That even the mainstream media is shining a light on that problem, and there are members of Congress openly talking about it on major mainstream media shows. So I think that's a good thing, because even though it's a little spooky for people, they're beginning to realize the scope of the problem that I've been facing. And in terms of, I have to thread this needle of asking people to come forward, but I don't control the Federal Marshal Service or FBI or anyone else to extend a security detail to them. Now, what we have done, there are people in the system that once someone surfaces, we can ask them to put an electromagnetic surveillance around them, and that if anyone does threaten them, we capture that, and those people can then be arrested or tracked back to who's giving those orders. Because obviously there is a chain of command of people involved in these criminal operations and extrajudicial killings, as they're called, the kill list or wet works operations. And I also revealed that there are some very high value whistleblowers that wanted to come forward about 3 years ago, and from out west at a covert black site. And there was a meeting in a skiff where it was openly being talked about killing them and closing those leaks and just flat out killing those whistleblowers. And of course, a couple of them I'm very close to, and one has young children, and it was, very frightening for them. So, for most people, they Google on the internet and it's all entertainment, but it's a deadly serious matter. And it's good that this is beginning to be discussed in mainstream circles, as well as with members of Congress who are aware of it. And in fact, even the president referred to these missing scientists the other day on Air Force One, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff. Do we have any questions from our members? That just post it in chat, please, if you have any questions. Everyone is talking about disclosure now, but the thing nobody's talking about is CE5, because obviously you are the man for CE5. So how is that going to help pivot things to the future? Because really, every other person is discussing disclosure now. So we have another solution.
Yeah, well, that's why we just released this movie, CE5, New Frontier of Contact, because there needs to be an answer to what's next. Let's say Best case scenario, this comes out and it comes out honestly. And then the public are going to go, well, what are we going to do with this? And there's two answers that have to be given very quickly. Number one, the humanitarian technologies, medical and energy systems that would end poverty and fix the environment, those need to be come out as soon as possible, like 100 years ago. And then the other is a stand down order by the president to stop the targeting with these electromagnetic pulse weapons of the ET craft. And instead, the governments, not just the United States, but around the world, make a decision to make peaceful contact with them, which is what CE5 contact is. And that was the original. I'm wearing this shirt. This is from the 90s. It's the original CE5 organization, CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which I founded in 1990. And the whole purpose of that was to say, we can be citizen ambassadors and diplomats until such time, and maybe even continuing so, the governments of the world understand that we're not alone and they need to do something constructive and intelligent and civilized about it. But in the past, presidents haven't known about this subject. President Obama admitted that. Clinton has admitted it. They tried to find out, were pushed aside. You had all these sort of problems that have happened over the years where there's been a decapitation of the legal government, not only of the United States, but of other countries. Because I've had meetings with ministers of defense and heads of state in other countries in Europe, Canada, Australia, and I can tell in Japan, there's no difference. This is a global criminal covert operation. And so once this comes out, one of the chief things that has to happen is CE5 contact. And so all of us doing this, in a sense, we're warming up the super conscious field when we do it. And that's why, by the way, late in May, we're going to have a whole week where we're going to be going through the deep history of everything I've experienced with ET contact, but also disclosure that are private stories that nobody's heard. Those will be recorded by a 2-camera shoot out at our retreat center in Hot Springs. There's still about 10 or 11 positions open for people who want to come to that in person. And then it's going to be webinared, live stream. And then if the weather is suitable, you can never know in this part of the world, we'll go out on the land we have there and do CE5 contact at night. And we're also going to do a big event for the public for about 350 people on a mountain there in the Blue Ridge Mountains outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, and at the end of July. And that's going to be a 3-day weekend, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. And we'll be up on this mountaintop that we have all to ourselves. But it's a really beautiful facility. And what's nice is that the daytime meetings are space is adjacent to the outside terraces that are on top of this mountain with a view forever, 100-mile view. So it's going to be a phenomenal place to do CE5 at night in late July. So I hope all of you can come to that as well. I think we have the site up now where you can register if you want to come.
Yeah, it is on our website. So when a person is meditating, is there anything specific they should be focusing on, any concepts or ideas in order to manifest universal peace?
Well, people confuse meditation with regular thought. Okay, so let's talk about that. Meditation is a process of going deeper and deeper into more quiet levels of consciousness to where you're only perceiving the mind itself. That's the meditation. Now, meditation is also used generically as thinking, but that's not how I'm using it. So the meditation per se is not to think about things or ideas. It's to go into a state of deep consciousness where you can then remote view, see the future, contact the ETs from a deep level of quantum entangled consciousness, non-locality. Now, once you're in a deeper state of consciousness, then you can put those intentions out because it's more powerful. Instead of operating from your little monkey mind and intellect. You're operating from a deeper level of consciousness. That's that universal field of awareness. And that is where it is very powerful. Same thing if you want to engage in intercessionary prayer to help somebody or do anything. If you go into that state of mind and get centered there, it's 1,000 times more powerful. So that's the power of being in the deep meditative state and then learning to do the CE5 coherent thought sequencing or to put out a prayer and intention for universal peace. But you want to first do the meditation and go as deeply and into a deep state of quiet consciousness as possible. And that will actually then supercharge the any intent you put out there, including contacting the ETs, because you're then operating from a much more powerful aspect of yourself that is universal and omnipresent. And that's the key thing to realize, is that everyone right now hears me speaking and they're awake. But if you were to do sort of a Zen process of removing everything you're hearing and perceiving and just shift quietly to the mind itself that's awake, that's what we're talking about, going deep into that. It's very simple, actually. And so that's what we're going to practice every night up there on Hillcrest. But in May, with the whole group, we'll do that. We'll do group meditations. We'll do the Sanskrit puja, which I think is interesting, that the Boogosphere has a type of Proto-Sanskrit writing around the top of it. I don't know if you all have seen it, which is interesting, because I knew when I died, when I was 17, and then 6 months later had that onboard ET contact experience where I sort of created the CE5 protocol with our ET friends. I knew that I was hearing words and language that were like Sanskrit. And that when I learned meditation and began to study the Vedas, I knew that language originated from another star system way back, from, probably a couple 100,000 years ago, not just 5,000. But, and then to see it on this Boogosphere, which is 12,560 years old, is really quite interesting. And it, in a sense, it didn't surprise me, but it was sort of confirmatory of what I had always sensed and seen and remote viewed, but which is quite exciting.
It is. And there's so many more sightings of these spheres in all different places around the world. What are your thoughts on why they're suddenly being released now?
Well, I think that there are multiple types of spheres. There are energetic orbs being seen that people call spheres. There are man-made spheres that people are confusing with the non-human ones. And then there are the ones that are the extraterrestrial ones, some of which may be more recent in terms of their arrival, doing surveillance of the mess we've made of the planet. Right. But I think these others, the one that we're studying and others like it, that appear to be activated in that area of South America, and the one that we did, get possession of, that's 12,500 years old. I think it's a sphere, but not all spheres are from the same origin and what have you. So, but now if we're speaking directly of all the Boogosphere type ones that are being seen, and there are multiple ones that have been filmed up close enough, you can see the same equator on it, the same design on it. They're identical, it appears, to the one that was retrieved in Colombia, South America, in Buga, by that farmer. And I think that what people need to understand is that that activation, I call it the Boogosphere activations, is very likely the result of a sensing of a geophysical instability and magnetic field instability, and perhaps something out in space. And it's sort of an early warning system, because there's no ETs on board, and they're ancient, and they're being activated all of a sudden. I would say that it's a early warning system, letting people know that the Earth is in a bit of trouble, and people should prepare for that. And that's my sense of it. I do not think I'm wrong, actually. But but it's fascinating. What I'm waiting to find out, and I'd like to, I wish I could interview, but I don't speak Spanish. Everyone who has seen one, and has anyone seen them at the point of origin? Did they just materialize in thin air, which ET objects can? Did they come up from the ground, or did they come from the sky? I don't know. And see, this is, I've never heard anyone ask that question or address it, but if I had all the people who've ever seen one of these in South America, that would be a question to ask that I think the researchers in Latin America that we know, like Jaime Maussan, should do, because I think it would say a lot if that could be nailed down. Right now, we don't know, honestly.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So if Trump actually is able to accurately release the truth about the UFOs and release these files, that's probably going to greatly improve his legacy as a president? Wouldn't you agree?
Well, it depends on how it's handled. The warning as soon as he got elected, because I knew this was going to get fast-tracked during that term, not because of him, just because of the confluence of things going on with law enforcement, Pentagon, the Senate, the House, disclosure in general. And he happens to be in the office of the presidency when all this is almost certainly going to break. That if it's handled badly, it'd be ruinous. It'll be 1,000 times worse than the mismanagement of COVID or what have you, or the missteps that led up to 9/11. On the other hand, if it's handled well, it would be a unifying and pivotal moment in human history. And so what we're waiting to see, and what I say to people who are very close to the president, people who spend time privately with him, that he needs to get this one right. Now, the other thing I think people have to be, not have too high expectations right away, because he has not spent time delving into this, and neither has the vice president. The vice president admitted a few weeks ago on the Benny Johnson show that he wanted to know about this as soon as he took office, but he's been too busy and has not done an in-depth study of it. This is why the president has assigned this to Hegsteth, the Secretary of War, as they call it now. When we'll have a Secretary of Peace, that would be nice. But a Secretary of Universal Peace, that's what we need. But I think that someday, God willing. So I think that one of the things we're doing, and we've just done, is to get a briefing materials over to Secretary Hegsteth as well as to the Vice President. We've already provided those materials to people, to the president, people close to him, and to members of Congress. But the point person appears to be the Secretary Hegsteth. But of course, we have this mess in Iran and the Middle East. So I'm sure his plate is very full. So I'm telling people, even though the president literally yesterday in Phoenix said these things are going to come out very, very soon, I'm wondering why, because now, I will say, I don't want to betray any confidences that are sensitive. I do know in the last year plus, there are people in the system based on the information we've provided, and some of the military people working with us who have gone out in the field and gotten more assets and whistleblowers and what have you, that they know a great deal more than they're saying, including the president. And the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and a few others. So the question is, how much of that will they reveal? I know that Bob Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace, that's now closed, has recommended, he's very good friends with the president, that he do a soft disclosure and leave most of the information out, because people like him who are involved in projects that have turned out to be quite illegal and have squandered a lot of tax dollars, I think they don't want the whole story to come out, including the fact that we have been building with black budget funds without the approval of the Congress or the president for decades, the man-made UFOs, by reverse engineering them. Now, this is a multi-trillion-dollar problem over the last 70 years or so, since Eisenhower was pushed aside in the 1950s. So the question is, how much of that will they acknowledge, and how much of the information they disclose will be things that look scary that aliens did that were actually done by psychological warfare operations out of the CIA working with these corporate aerospace giants that we know about. So this is what I'm watching for. And believe me, we may have another press conference. It depends, what comes out, and we will have to analyze it very carefully and point out the things that are misdirects or wrong information. And honestly, I don't think it would be done deliberately by Mr. Hegstead or the president. It's because they simply don't. Frankly, they need a subject expert. And I have offered to help guide them through that. But I think what happens, these things tend to happen very hastily, without enough thought and without enough research. And because everyone on this call knows how much most of the information on this subject has been deliberately curated for the false information, and inside this sort of haystack of disinformation are the gold nuggets in there. But you really got to know what you're doing. And every one of these people, because there are people who are on our team who are friends, personal friends with Secretary Hegstead and the vice president and the president. And so I know for a fact that none of them have had adequate information and perspective and analysis done. So it's going to be interesting, to see what this first tranche is. And if it combines information with disinformation, we're going to have to go very public with correcting that. And of course, I'm not shy about doing so, but
no,
not at all. I'll go mano a mano with anybody, anywhere, for the truth. And I think that we have to be that way. Now, other people that I'm talking to who are in Europe and elsewhere believe that there'll be very little revealed because they haven't really spent the time to get to the bottom of it. And will it just be another bunch of sighting reports and maybe some photos or videos? And of those, are those going to be man-made ones or non-human ones? And does anyone who's looking at them know the difference? Now,
Right.
Everyone listening to this knows the difference, but you're making a huge mistake if you think that this has been drilled down as well as it should be by these extremely busy people who are at the head of the U.S. government, right? Now, the
Right.
people who have really had time to drill down on this more are certain members of Congress that I've been meeting with for 3-4 years. And in that case, they have a much deeper understanding. And a couple of them have been speaking with the president, but only in 5, 10, 15-minute intervals. So, what I don't know is the extent of the depth of the knowledge and what that will reflect in the disclosure that the president referred to yesterday, but we'll see. And we just have to be ready to, respond.
Well, it seems kind of tricky also because I know a lot of the aerospace, a lot of those big corporations also provide a lot of campaign funding to different people. So,
yes.
It makes it
Pay
a
to
little
play,
tricky.
or pay to play. Well, it's not only that, but remember, the same companies that have been running these so-called illegal legacy programs also provide all the conventional jets and hardware and rockets and surveillance tools, and the B-2 stealth is Northrop Grumman. So people have to be realistic. How much can you bite the hand that's feeding you if, in fact, you're very dependent? Because the U.S. government are filled with bureaucrats who don't do anything. They don't make anything. It's all contractors. So the action, and this is where recently I've been saying this for 30 years, we've had members of Congress like Burleson and also Burchett and some others, Luna, saying that, in fact, the center of gravity on all this isn't in government programs, it's in the corporate world. And of course, I discovered that in a little over 30 years ago. And I think this is the other problem, is that it's the tail is wagging the dog. the government should really, of we the people, should be in control, but it's actually the large corporate, multinational corporations. But those same corporations, the entire defense industry and the Department of Defense and everything they want to do is dependent on that hardware and equipment coming from the same companies that have been running these illegal programs. So, this is, I think, one of the real sticking points, is that how do you proceed and acknowledge what we have and what's been done, because you don't want to stomp all over your source of weapons when you're in the middle of a war in the Middle East. So you have to then look more geopolitically and strategically on what kind of brakes might be put on a full disclosure and a truthful disclosure, which is why the Disclosure Project, why we have to stay engaged and put the information out and keep pushing the envelope for accountability and the truth. Because otherwise, I'll tell everyone right now, if it came out that all UFO events and sightings were alien, and that would then open the door that all the criminal things that have been done and hurtful things, such as abductions and mutilations and the murder of people by what look like aliens on spaceships, which have all been done by human operations, staging, pretending to be alien. That is the worst case scenario. So, I said to one person recently here in Washington, if you have been using that technology criminally against innocent civilians, not just here, but all over the world, you have forfeited the right to keep that secret. That cannot be kept secret. So, but now Bob Bigelow, who spends time with the president and was in the private quarters of Mar-a-Lago on election night and things like that, they're advising otherwise, right? And, I'm a relatively nobody. So, all we can do is keep telling the truth and putting it out there, and then have enough education that we're doing that people in Congress and other people who've been in the military, like General Flynn and others, are learning this and saying and reinforcing what we're saying. So we need a multiplier effect there, and that's what I've been trying to get, and we have it now. So we'll just have to see. It's very dynamic. I think people should be prepared for this being a pretty wild ride.
Yep. Are you aware of any persons in the UK that were, taken out, let's say, or disappeared because they were trying to bring this subject forward?
I do know that has happened. I'm trying to think if I know the names of any. Years ago, one of the early disclosure witnesses was a guy named, he had been military intelligence in the United Kingdom, named Gordon Crichton. And he published Flying Saucer Review, FSR, which was a very good journal. And he told me that, yes, there had been people that if they're too much trouble will be erased and removed. And he knew of those. So, there's no question that this has happened all over the world, because remember, everyone makes the mistake of thinking that this is there's a Chinese and a Russian and American and a this and a that. No, the group that is running these covert programs since at least the 60s have been like a secret UN, where all these different countries' interests are there, but in a clandestine operation that usually their heads of state and other people don't know about. If you look at the testimony of Carl Wolf, who was at the National Security Agency filtering operation down at here at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia in 1968, when we were downloading the early digital images of the moon by the lunar orbiter before we landed in 69 with the lunar module. He said that operating center where he went in, that was very, very compartmented and secret, was like a UN. There were people from China, Russia, the Soviet Union, even then, 1968. So the hardest thing I've had in Washington and in other countries is to get people to understand, yes, there are compartmented, code-named SAPs, special access projects, that are illegal, black ones, unacknowledged. in governments, but those are actually tied together at a more integrated level that evolved in the late 50s and 60s that involve all of these countries. It's not just one. And so everyone's still looking at it with a geopolitical map in their head. And I said, no, you need to look at this as a criminal transnational organization. It's a TINCO, transnational criminal organization, like large, international drug cartels or large international human trafficking cartels. But this is the granddaddy of them. And so I think this is the problem is that people, it's a paradigm adjustment, to think of it that way. And it's been the hardest thing for me to get people to comprehend, really understand it, that it really doesn't matter what country. It's the same thing. If you wanted to invent a free energy device and thought you could keep it secret and patent, move to Brazil, their assets in the Brazilian job, they're going to come out, they're going to kill you. I mean, this is a global operation, and for this organization, there are no national boundaries. They just move across them like they're not there. So, I mean, by the way, even our top special forces guys, I know that's what they do. They can go in and out, no one knows they were there. But imagine at this level, the kind of technology they have, the object like Michael Herrera saw, that was a 300-foot diameter octagon that went from hover to 100,000 miles per hour over the horizon in 1 or 2 seconds. And that's man-made. So, you're not going to be tracked on radar, and you're not going to be interdicted by an F-18 Hornet, right? Not going to happen. So this is the issue, and this is something we know, that there have these objects that are man-made UFOs have been tracked in Russian airspace, in China. One was actually downed in northern Iran and had to be blown up on the ground in situ, right where it landed. And those were man-made objects that were anti-grav. So we've had that confirmed by some inside military folks. So I think that this is very complex, and this is why I think at some point, if there's an initial release that then creates more interest, there should be some kind of a governmental retreat where we should go in and be the subject experts to unpack all this, because it needs to be a couple of days. I mean, because it's so important. Right now, I don't see that anyone quite, except a few members of Congress and some people who are kind of peripheral to the cabinet and to the Oval Office, have as deep an understanding as they need. So this is what I'm hoping will close that gap before the train leaves the station too much further.
Right. We're in this all the time, but most of the people in government are starting like at, preschool level on this subject.
Zero.
So
No, literally zero. They have no information. Almost everyone I've ever briefed in government, whether it was a CIA director or even 3-star generals at the Pentagon, had no knowledge of it. They were never read in. And so, when you go from having no information to this about ready to be officially acknowledged by the government, I think there is a very steep learning curve, we would say, that needs to happen in order for it to occur safely and appropriately and truthfully.
Do you think there's any suspicious or foul play that Lou Elizondo had a very bad bike accident, or I know
No, I think he ran into some deer. Right. Anyone who lives out like he does in Wyoming, or where I do out in the Blue Ridge Mountains, I call them kamikaze deer. I mean, they just jump in front of you all the time. So I think it was just that,
And often you don't really talk a lot so much about what ETs actually look like. Do you have any insights on, their civilizations or things like that? Or
yes, that's a very long discussion. But look, if you can visualize, there are ones that we've seen that are a foot and a half tall. There are ones that are 12 feet tall. I understand there are some that are 30 feet tall. That they're from a myriad of star systems and planetary systems with different biological and gravitational and solar energy, you know, environments that would lead to different evolutionary paths. There are a couple species that would be like first cousins to humans that look very, very similar. I know I met with one when I was first starting this project in 1990 who looked like a man from Norway, but jet black hair and the strangest blue eyes, but white skin. But look, the features look like a Northern European. And then, you know, but on our CE5 expeditions, you took a picture of Bijou, and then the healer has this sort of the praying mantis shaped triangular head with sort of a little beak, and so there are all kinds of different species. Now, keep in mind that a lot of the ones that people have encountered in abductions are the hybrid man-made. Some are robotic. In the early days, I talked to a man. He said, well, they would find men of short stature and dress them up and make them look like an ET. But there are many of the ones that people have encountered are actually weird, man-made, creepy things, kind of like a Frankenstein, meets space age sort of story. And that's real. And I've known about these so-called programmed life forms that are biological, but they have integrated circuits in their cerebral cortex, and they're controlled by humans. And those are then used in mutilations and abductions and all kinds of weird stuff. So I think people need to understand that, one of the problems with all of this coming out, it's going to come out on the coattails of 70 years of very well orchestrated psychological warfare information, disinformation, staged fake alien events, staged abductions. You have people like this Gary Nolan, who took a ton of money from CIA to be documenting head trauma and brain injuries done by the aliens during abductions. And of course, every one of those people he's studying have been victimized by humans using these advanced technologies to make them look alien. And we know this. But is the president going to know this? Is Pete Hegseth going to know this? Is the DNI going to know this? Now, I have been very explicit about this with key members of Congress that I've had a lot of private time with, and with people who are very close to the president and are personal friends. But how much of this is sinking in, I don't know. And this is where it gets into a very risky business right now, where if it comes out incorrectly or with a lot of that false mythology combined with the truth, then we're going to have our work cut out for us. The Disclosure Project is going to have to lean into that very heavily.
Right.
And so will the public. All you guys need to be writing to the president and your members of Congress. And if you're in another country, your members of your parliament or prime minister, and saying, you really need to get to the bottom of this, but here's a link to the briefing document. Because this briefing document we did for this president, we have published, as you all know, and you can, send those people a copy, which you should, actually.
Right. Someone's asking if you had debriefed Representative Burchett, but you have provided a lot of intelligence to him.
Oh, yeah, many. Oh, yeah, for years. Yeah, I've been providing information to him for 4 years. I don't know, a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and he's, he is deep dive, and then Congressman Burleson. Now, I've also met with Ogles of Missouri, and I've had long discussions with Moskowitz, who's a Democrat from Florida, who's on the House Oversight. So yes, of course. I mean, the people who are right hand to Marco Rubio, I've worked with for 2 or 3 years, and he is now Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. He's wearing 2 hats. So there's a lot of information that has been given directly by me meeting with these people. I'm here in Washington now. I'm here because Demi Lovato Thursday night was playing at the Capital One Arena. It was packed. It was great. And she's a very big supporter of CE5 and what we're doing in disclosure. So I went backstage and we hung out for a while before her show. And then I got to see her show. I'd actually never seen her perform. She has an amazing voice. That's
very cool.
Yeah, it was fun. We had fun.
Yeah, we put the picture up on social media. So you guys
Oh,
backstage.
that's right. Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, backstage hanging out. She had the green room for the celebrity candles, and it was beautiful. It's like, oh, I wish we had time to meditate. We could do CE5 right here. But I mean, she was getting ready to go on stage with, I don't know, 10 or 20,000 people in
Right.
the arena. But it was fun. Try to make it fun.
Yeah, you got to have fun in between all this crazy
I do.
chaos.
You know me. I always can have fun.
That's right. Have you heard of an approaching giant planet called Hercobulus?
No.
Okay.
I don't have any information about. I mean, there are all these stories of this thing and that thing, and if I don't see it myself, or if I don't have a credible source, it's like that Avi Loeb saying, "Oh, this comet was a alien spaceship," and then there was this quack on Gaia saying it had however many, 1 million reptilian aliens on it, or some bizarre, stupid thing, none of which was true. But I always tell people, don't forget, Avi Loeb has been lobbying for him to receive $1 billion of our tax dollars to set up a planetary defense system against the aliens. No, he's a total shill for this corrupt secret government. And so I tell people, I say, consider the frickin' source, all right? Somebody who is making up nonsense like that, scare tactics, to try to get gullible people in the government to pony up $1 billion for something we do not need and wouldn't work even if we needed it. What does he think he's going to put up there? I mean, these civilizations are so advanced that they were hostile, we'd be gone. Even Congressman Burchett said that a couple of years ago, because once he realized what those technologies were, they were hostile. Boom. I mean, we started knocking them out of the sky when we had vacuum tubes and didn't even have jet aircraft flying regularly and barely had a rocket. Hadn't even put Sputnik in space. And we were using electromagnetic weapons to down ET craft in the late 40s and 50s. So if they were hostile, it would have been all over probably before I was born in 1955. So I go to people, I said, yeah, whatever. That's just a psychological warfare talking point. But you're going to have a lot of people who want that to be the truth, because I think, there is a huge element of people in the Pentagon, in the system, who want to have a threat from outer space and to unite the world around a militaristic sort of totalitarian system.